but then like the moment where you both like come back together and like you brought the resources back and you say hi for the first time, it always ends up being like really magical.
Oh
And
yeah.
so like yeah, so whenever you find in game development, whenever you find something like that, those are the rare nuggets of like this is these moments are hard to find and better just amplify those over everything else because that's just how you do it.
I am joined by Jacob Liechty of System Era Softworks, and we are going to be talking about Astroneer, which is entering early access very soon. It's a
Hmm.
game we've been covering for a little while. But so, Jacob, why don't you start things off by giving us the convention pitch for Astroneer?
Oh, fascinating. So like a couple sentences on what
Yeah,
this
yeah.
giant project is. Yeah.
Why should people be interested?
So Astroneer is a multiplayer space exploration game, and I think actually multiplayer, the co-op aspect of it is has ended up being the most like magical part of the whole thing. And so you play as an astronaut that's been sent, or an astroneer that's been sent by some corporation off into the stars to collect resources and build out your little space empire. And you can do that with friends, and I think that's what's really cool about our game.
Yeah, I think you've really touched on the thing I wanted to kind of talk about most in this chance to talk with you about what you're putting into Astroneer as it approaches early access, and that's multiplayer. So you said that it's something that has become the main focus. So if you could talk a little bit about kind of the background of planning multiplayer in
Yeah.
Astroneer, whether it was something you were planning from the start or something that kind of you realized you wanted to put in later on, and what kind of challenges have you found in
It
implementing
sort
it?
of got that's actually a good question because it sort of got worked into over time. I think like when we started realizing the kinds of experiences that you can get out of the co-op in our game, that's when it all started coming together. So like what ends up being a great moment in our game a lot of times is that like since you can build bases and you can kind of carve out your little space on one planet, you can also send your friend off to some other planet to go like collect some resources that aren't on the current planet, right? And you can play simultaneously. On different planets, but then like the moment where you both like come back together and like you brought the resources back and you say hi for the first time, it always ends up being like really magical.
Oh
And
yeah.
so like yeah, so whenever you find in game development, whenever you find something like that, those are the rare nuggets of like this is these moments are hard to find and better just amplify those over everything else because that's just how you do it.
Yeah.
So
So what are some of the things that have changed in some of the most recent builds? We got
mhm,
an opportunity to play the game at PAX East,
mhm,
um, which didn't have a multiplayer available.
right.
But I've seen in you did a big Twitch stream of some
Mhm,
kind of features. But what's some of the things that have had to change, kind of an eye towards things that you've had to kind of sacrifice necessarily to make
yeah.
sure multiplayer works?
I don't think multiplayer in particular prevented us from actually doing much. The sorts of things that we've changed over time tended to just be like we found a better way to do it, so we just replaced the old system, and that was just like the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
The things that have changed most substantially are probably the base building elements of the game. It was always like a big question of like how big are the things you can build? How do you build a thing that's bigger than the thing you've already built? You know,
Yeah.
all these kinds of questions, right? And just like kind of and you kind of realize over time like what's important about this thing is what's not important, and you just find like the simplest way, the one that's like easiest to learn, easiest to like get yourself going, easiest to teach the player. And I think so. Like the current paradigm is that like you start with a single little drop pod that comes down, and you just kind of work from there. It kind of like offers you these little nubs that you can click on that let you expand your base there. You can eventually, if you research the right item, you can go to other planets and like start other bases there. And yeah, that's and like getting to that point was the trickiest bit. Like it used to be like three different ways you could click on something. It was like nonsense. And but like yeah, I think we're pretty happy with where we're at right now. It's just been iteration. I think it's all pretty typical for game development.
Sure.
Although like maybe a lot of people don't do that. Though. Maybe they stop too soon. They get like, kind of attached to what they built before and they don't change it. But we've changed a lot over this year. I think if you look at our earlier builds, there's just a lot of like very substantial differences in how the game is played.
Yeah. One thing that I talked to, I believe it was Brendan Wilson, at PAX East about,
Mhm.
is something that really captured my imagination with Astroneer when I first started seeing images and GIFs and all sorts of stuff coming out.
Mhm.
Um, was the fact that a lot of the UI elements are diegetic. They're built into the universe.
Yeah.
It's not a separate thing. And originally, there was virtually no information. The
Yeah.
resources were just shapes and colors.
Yeah.
But in the latest builds, I've seen that that's been added in. I
Yeah.
wondered if you could kind of touch on that as in that aspect to a multiplayer, because Brendan Wilson had said it's something they were probably going to have to do simply to facilitate communication with people.
Yeah. Yeah. So this like really highlights something that's been like my design paradigm working on these aspects of the game, which is that like you don't cheat too early and like throw information at the player too early
Mm,
in the development cycle, not like in the game. So like when you're first like prototyping a game, it's like cheating to like find if you're really looking for the best way the game can be played and like the best sets of resources and what you can do in the game,
mm,
and you start like throwing tutorials at them like a year before you ship the game. You're not going to find the thing that speaks for itself.
mm.
What I've always told people on the team is that you can always add in a piece of text that says this thing does this thing. You can
Right.
always do that. That's easy. What's hard is finding a manipulation paradigm, a like set of game things you can do with gameplay that are like easy to learn on their own.
Mm.
That like where and I think especially in our game, since we're a third person game, there's so much sort of the art that is the gameplay.
Yeah.
Sort of forcing that art to be the right thing for the game was a tense process, but I think it really paid off. It's like that you mentioned the diagetic interface, like all of that is just like there's just like lists and lists and lists of like art requests that I made. Like the art needs to be just like this, and that's like really that's it's always like tricky for the artist, but like it ends up being that like well of course you want the art to be the design, you want it to all work together, you want it to feel really nice, like and I think like we've succeeded in that in a way that I hope is unique and I hope isn't just like in the clouds.
No,
Well,
I
I guess
think
we'll say yeah.
I think it absolutely succeeded, and it was kind of funny when I was first watching your recent Twitch stream. I was almost sad to see some of the text because in the early days I kind of loved that there was you could just refer to stuff as oh yeah the yellow star and
Yeah,
the
right,
hexagon. You know, it was
right,
kind of
right.
cool.
So I think we haven't done this yet, but I think like it'll be as easy as like a checkbox in the menu where like we want to eventually work towards this game where there just is no text.
Mm,
Um, and of course like when you learn in the game, you need to know that the thing is called like iron or hematite or whatever.
right.
Um, and like you need to like place the convention into the community's mind about what these things actually are. But
Right.
then of course if you're a streamer and you're just playing a game, like you don't need a lot of stuff. You know what it is. You can talk out loud. You can tell the audience what these things are. And that's how the real world works. It's not like you're roaming around and you see like a new car and it's like this is a 2016 blah 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 hovering above right now. That's
Little
nonsense.
little
You
text
talk to
box
the people,
pops
right?
up. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And like hopefully what the thing looks like tells you what it is. But if of course in the pinch you need to be able to put the text there and actually say to the player
Right.
and teach them directly. But that's kind of what I was saying earlier. Like the art needs to look like the thing that it looks like, and it needs to like help suggest the function of it. And I think if you do that well, it really pays off. And then when you add in the text later, then it's just all the better.
Mm, yeah,
So
I think you've done that. The other thing I really wanted to touch on was this concept of early access. So you're entering early access this month. And
mhm,
specifically, I kind of wanted to pick your brain as an indie developer, how you plan to manage the community and how you
right.
plan to kind of communicate your goals and your updates with the community.
Hmm.
I think that's something that doesn't necessarily get talked about, and a lot of people are
Yeah,
more interested in what's going to be coming. And I think it's something that other developers that might be watching this interview might find
yeah.
helpful.
Oh yeah, totally. So we've definitely talked a lot about this internally. One of the guys at Adam used to help co-run a website called Polycount, which was
Mm,
a community of artists, and so he's got a lot of experience there. And we've all internally just like had so many discussions about what's like the best way to do this, because like if you just do exactly what all the other games have done before, you probably not going to talk to the community much at all. I mean, indie developers in particular are like notorious for doing things different than AAA.
mm,
Um, and I think we're just trying to like find our particular way to be different and unique and correct. I think that's the most important thing is to
mm.
is to is to correctly interface with the community, not just in the way that gets you the most sales, but just in the way that like makes the community happy and like makes them feel engaged. And so I think like when we come out in early access, and we've like said this explicitly, we've like written blog posts and like tweeted it and like we've said, like the game is unfinished on purpose.
Mm.
Like if like we you can ship a game too late and you can ship a game too early. We're trying to ship it at the exact right time. If the game was completely finished, if we weren't embarrassed by certain aspects of the game, that means that we shipped too late.
Mm.
That means that we weren't willing to listen to community feedback early enough to like not feel stressed or something.
Right.
And we just like sat on it for years and years thinking we knew what we were doing and then shipped it and then you're gonna like it. No, it's not like that at all. It's like we sort of know what we're doing. I mean, we have experience or whatever, but at the end of
Mm.
the day, we don't have all the information. We don't know what the community likes, and we're trying to like bring people on board to make the game with. And so I think we picked the right timing. Like it's been a year and a few months since we first announced, and I think like that was good period of time to start building people's interest in the game, and we'll release pretty soon, and people will uh, have a mountain of feedback for us,
Oh, I'm sure.
and that's something that we are going to try to welcome. Of course, it's going to be a lot. It's going to be so much information for me to and the rest of the team to digest. But I think um, I did a design stream on Twitch a couple weeks ago,
Hmm.
and it was just like mountains and mountains of questions, and and I think people just like appreciate like you talking to them. It's like you don't need to be like genius. You don't need to be the best game developer in the world. You don't need to have made the feature that's like perfect. You just need to talk to them.
Mm.
You should be open and transparent, and that's like kind of been the theme that we've been pushing for internally. Is just like we're just like these like guys who are making a game, and you guys are just the people playing the game, and it's not really much more complicated than that.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So kind of moving from Astroneer to you, give us your story on how you got into independent game development.
So I wouldn't have gotten into it unless some of the people on my team like kind of dragged me into it. So I mean I always knew I did want to eventually not work for the man because that's where a lot of us were previously, just working for big AAA studios.
Mm.
But I mean I'm pretty sure everybody on the team has at some point like made their own game,
Mm.
like some like small stupid thing that wasn't fun at all,
Right.
but just like it was like kind of what got us all into it in the first place. It's like, oh, I can like sit down and make things with the computer. It's great. And so but then like transitioning to actually being an indie developer is a lot trickier because like like it's not good enough for just to be like this thing that you might like but nobody else likes, right? It has to like you have to make a business out of it, and you have to eventually people's livelihoods are going to depend on you, and oh my gosh, all this stuff. And there's different ways to do indie, but I think like our particular way was like we really wanted to like get the full experience,
Mm.
and that involves to some extent actually being successful. People actually have to play your game to be able to really feel what being indie developer
That,
is like, right?
that's true. Yeah.
So and so yeah, so this was like almost 3 years ago when it was like this game was first pitched to me by Paul, or one of our artists, and just kind of went from there. And eventually I quit my job. Eventually everybody quit their job, and now we're kind of here.
Cool.
So yeah.
So what are some games that have kind of informed you that you would call your inspirations?
Oh man. Well, it's weird. So I'm the designer on the team, and so it's like I'm like supposed to always be keeping up with like games, but sometimes I don't. Well, I just definitely don't do that as much as I should be. All my inspirations like come from my like childhood, not
Right.
like from like what games are doing now. I tend to actually like snuff what games are doing now because I think like I'd rather just like figure out what the best way to do it, not just like kind of build off of what people happen to be doing right now, you know?
Hmm. Yeah, that's an,
Which is a dangerous thing because you might just eschew something that you should have been paying attention to. But I try to pay attention to that too. Uh, from my childhood though, like I always loved the big open world, the Zeldas and the combination of open world and linear games like the Zeldas and the Elder Scrolls.
hmm.
Those are my games.
Right on.
And it was like especially so like Morrowind in particular. Morrowind actually had like the like OG crafting, right? That
Yeah,
was like
yeah.
Like
Absolutely.
that, like before crafting was like this thing where, oh, I've got this ore and I smelt it and then I combine it with this thing. Like before it was that, it was just like a game design mechanic, right? It was just like something that they used because it was cool and smart. Um, and that game was great.
Yeah, that's true. So to kind of pull things to a close, are there any other indie teams out there, indie games out there that you think are doing something really cool that
Mhm.
you would suggest people check out? Specifically, if they're ones you think people might not have heard of.
So a game. So yeah. So I totally lied about there being some current games that we've been inspired by because that's yeah. So there's a game called Subnautica,
Mm.
which like honestly I mean hopefully they don't sue me, but like I feel like I stole so many like at least like conceptually like a lot of just like the overall flow of like how a game like that can work where you just like dropped in the middle of nowhere and you just like expect to survive, but there's also like this thing happening, you know.
Mm.
That was actually really inspiring. And they sort of released not with like a huge amount of like bang, but they've like slowly worked their way into like a really successful product
Mm.
that has like a growing community and people feel like they were in early and like and I assume they're just going to keep doing that and that's really neat. Um, um, yeah, I think that's like they're like the ideal indie team, honestly. They like did it totally correctly. They had like this great feedback system and like all this stuff. So I mean they're like the right mix that I think is the answer to that question of like you might not have heard of them. I mean, but like a lot of people are playing them. A lot of people are really having fun with that game. So
Cool. Well, Jacob Liechty of Systemera Softworks, thank you for taking the time to talk to us a little bit about the background of Astroneer.
yeah, thank you.
We'll have links down below so you can follow it on Steam and get ready for early access.
Awesome. Yeah. 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 Thanks so much for taking your time as well.